This is more like a little personal update, and it involves something that I have done a couple of times that has really helped regulate my nervous system and rewire my brain. And I'll be telling you a little bit about that. So if you know me, you know I love plants more than anything. Listening to the earth sing is my kind of jam. And ever since, gosh, as long as I can remember, I, as a channel, have been channeling messages and consciousness from the plants, from the earth, the flowers, the trees, all of the plants. I've even studied herbalism, and yeah, like you can see my work. The Rose Oracle was created from literally a 2-year deep dive into communing and merging with the rose and my rose garden. So working with plants and plant consciousness, I go way back with that. What I found really interesting was that every time I would check in to see if I was to do plant medicine, like the kind of more mind-altering plant medicine, I never got a yes. And it kind of confused me, but then I was like, well, I suppose I have these quite altered experiences just through connecting with just normal flowers and herbs, so maybe that's why. And I did do a deep dive on it, and the message I received was that for now at least, I was being called to connect in with the plants of my ancestry, to deepen my connection with the land here where I live in Glastonbury. So, you know, I do find on my journey, I am a mystic. It is through personal experience that I experience the most. And I also have prayed in many ways for more linear paths. And I thought that, yeah, working with the plants in a more like plant medicine in that more extreme way, it's like, why hasn't that opened up for me? Anyway, so it was when I was pregnant with Goldie, I got really clear that I was being called to work with psilocybin, with mushrooms. And I knew I didn't want to do it while I was pregnant with her and in postpartum, but I knew I had received the go-ahead, but it would be very particular how I was being invited to work with it. And I had a couple of friends who had opened a couple of doors for me, but none of them seemed right. And I remember I was talking to a really good friend of mine who was actually just sharing, I interviewed her on my podcast, and she was sharing about her experience with psilocybin, with mushrooms. And there was just so many parallels between the two of us. And I was sharing with her how I'd been receiving guidance to do mushrooms, but I knew the conditions need to be really specific. I then went downstairs and spoke to my husband, and I just said, look, I think I'm getting the go-ahead for this. My friend just told me all about it, but what I do know is the only way I should be doing this, or I'm being called to do this right now, is with my friend, a good friend of mine who is a woman in her 80s, who's a very trained therapist, and for us to do it together, as in she holds space for me when I do it and me hold space for her. Anyway, that very same day, this friend then contacted me and we went for lunch, and I told her this story literally at lunch, and she was like, yeah, I'm up for it. Let's see what, you know, I don't know where to get mushrooms from and da da da. Anyway, we literally walked to her house and opened the door, and there was this package that had just arrived, which included these 2 mushroom chocolates, which she had been gifted, literally 2 little love hearts. And she'd been gifted because she had supported some people through integrating their mushroom experience. And so it was like this big sign. It was very kind of like, okay, this is pretty obvious here. So anyway, we made a plan to do it, and I did it first and then she did it second, like on about a couple of weeks apart. And we set up the space like very devotionally. I prayed a lot about what I wanted to focus on during my mushroom journey. And we had a beautiful nature playlist and eye mask that I was to put on. And we actually did it in a beautiful room indoors, but it was connected to outdoors as well. And yeah, it was a deep, deep ceremony that we shared together. And my experience of the journey was that it really deeply changed me, but in a way that was really different to what I expected. My experience of doing mushrooms, to be honest, like the visions that I received were not that different to visions that I get often, like if I'm doing deep meditations or soul journeys or dreaming, or, you know, when you're in that lucid state. It wasn't, for me, it was not scary. It was not out there or extreme. Like, it's, my mind is kind of like that normally, I think. Maybe it's just being a visionary, being a creative, I don't know, being a mystic, a starseed, I don't know, is why I've created oracle decks, really, because I've had these visions my entire life and I just need to get them out of my head. So yeah, it wasn't that for me. And on the topic that I had wanted to focus on, the question that I was living into, which is to do with a particular relationship that I'd worked really, really, really hard in healing from, forgiveness, you know, all of that, and looked at from all different angles, so many different angles, done deep kind of cellular work to emotional work to inner child work. Like, I looked at it from all different angles. But when I did the journey, the thing that changed me the most was I started seeing these scenes, which again were not that out there for me, but because it was as if my defenses were calm, were reset, were in complete surrender. No part of me was in fight, flight, or freeze or emotion. It was deep compassion. And I was still feeling the emotions that would arise when I would get triggered in this. It was like there was this loop going on for me in this particular relationship. And it wasn't about the relationship. I'm using this as an example. But there was this loop that I would go round and round and round and round in. And no matter what I did, I could understand the loop, and I understood that like all the different angles. Like, I'd looked at it so many different ways. But what the mushrooms did was, it was as if my nervous system was so calm through the journey that my brain was able to create new loops, like new ways of being through doing it. And I could not believe how transformative it was. I didn't expect it to be that transformative. I thought it was going to be more like I'd have these visions that would change me, but for me, it was not about the visions. It was actually about the rewiring of my brain. That's what it felt like it was happening, like a resyncing of the way my brain worked with my nervous system. So, yeah. And so I've done mushrooms a couple of times since, but that first one was the most impactful. The second one was really helpful in understanding a pattern and rewiring that pattern again. But yeah, so I just felt like I'd share that story. Like, I am a huge, huge, huge believer in only doing this type of work, particularly plant medicine, when you're genuinely called, and arriving at the altar of the plant with deep, deep, humble devotion and clarity as well. I personally can't imagine doing it out in the open, just, you know, at like with a whole lot of people. I'd find that I would find that difficult myself, but I know everyone is different. But yeah, I just wanted to share it. And because, yeah, through some people sharing their experience with it, it really did help me. So yeah, felt the call to share that with you guys. So today's soul inquiry, as we always have a soul inquiry, is this: if the earth was to speak to you right now, what would it say? If the earth were to speak to you right now, what would it say? If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with a friend, hit subscribe, or leave a review. It all really helps other people to find it too. And if you like the topic of plant consciousness, there is a whole section on it in my new book, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. Section 3 is called The Way of the Mystic, returning to the mystery school of the earth. Thanks so much for being with me, and I'll see you next time.